Hi there, it's David Duffett here with another ClueCon Weekly, and we're delighted to have Andy Abramson with us today. Hi Andy, how are you doing?
Fine, David. Doing well and surviving the obviously new world we're in where everything is business unusual, no longer business as usual.
Very much. Things have changed beyond recognition in such a short space of time. It's hard to believe, isn't it?
Well, I think that things have changed for some, but for others, it's really just another extension of what we've been doing for years. As someone who's been running businesses remotely and living virtually with many people around the world, many companies around the world since 1993, and actually going as far back as when I was 14 and working in pro sports, the idea of not being in an office is second nature to me. The idea of being in an office is, for me, an unusual feat in that I'm there for meetings, but I'm not there to be working every single day. I've never punched a clock. I've never gone into a location, other than for a couple of years when I was with the Upper Deck Company. But even then, I was spending every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday working remotely at either a sporting event or a trade show. So this whole idea of going remote, when it comes to my life, I've been doing it all the time. So I really enjoy it.
Excellent, and that puts you in a very good position to kind of speak to what's going on at the moment from a position of having done it a bit more than most or a bit more than some. I wonder if, before we get on, I know you've got a presentation and I'm looking forward to that, but before we get onto that, can you give people a little bit of a background? I've known you from various telecoms events. In fact, my favourite Andy Abramson memory is you drop kicking a Raspberry Pi at ClueCon that was wrapped up in bubble wrap that Mark Crane was actually programming at the time from the podium. But you've done so much more than that, Andy. Can you give us a little bit of background for those people that there can't be many, but the odd person that might not have come across you before?
That was a very funny moment. And the reason I drop kicked it, David, was I had already done a volleyball serve with it, overhanded, heading it towards James Bodie's head, if I remember correctly. And then Michael was running around, so I decided to drop kick the ball in his direction, having been a former soccer player when I was in high school. And everybody just like, whoa, and they figured the Raspberry Pi wasn't going to work, and of course, it did. So some quick background.
Yeah, sure.
Been working in telecommunications since the late 90s. Working as agencies for various companies, and we've done a lot of exits. Probably 25 of our 47 exits that Comunicano has been a part of have been in the telecom world. The most popular one is something that many of us are probably still using today, was GrandCentral, which is now known as Google Voice. And so that was one of the earlier ones, like number 6 or 7. That was quickly followed by HiDef Conferencing that got sold to Citrix, which is now GoToMeeting, owned by LogMeIn. Also, Logitech acquired SightSpeed, one of the earliest video conferencing companies. We used to be in a battle with Skype, but most people forget that SightSpeed was the first SIP-based video conferencing platform around that got acquired by Logitech in 2007, 2008. So we've been working heavily in the value creation business around startups. SimpleSignal, Telesphere both got picked up by Vonage, and then GIPS, which was the standard for all codecs for voice. Well, they got acquired for Google, but it wasn't for the voice platform. Little did anyone know it was for the video platform, which today forms the underpinnings of WebRTC at Google, the underpinnings of now Google Voice and their Wolverine product. All of that activity played a hand in what Google's doing today. And I also helped my good friend Michael Robertson, even though he wasn't a client, by introducing them to GrandCentral. That led to Gizmo Project eventually being acquired by Google when Craig and Vincent were still at Google. So I've also worked with Dialpad. Now today, I've got my virtual CMO hat on for a couple of companies. One is Phonative, a CPaaS company that focuses on regulated industries around compliant communications. And some of that technology that Phonative uses is based upon, guess what? FreeSwitch. And then another company I serve as CMO for is SkySwitch. And SkySwitch is a white label service provider to the telecom reseller community, providing a unified communications as a service, cloud-based voice platform, and other services. So I'm heavily involved in the telecom industry, plus a few others.
Yeah, very much so. And yeah, I know Louis Holmes pretty well from SkySwitch. So,
Oh, that's great. Tell him you said hello.
Pleased to see you on the team there. And of course, the other thing that you do, Andy, in addition to these people that you're helping out on a professional basis, is you're a great advice giver and kind of speaker in the startup space. And I'm thinking particular things like IT Expo, where you host or at least participate in the startup camp and the different things that go on there.
That's right. Well, I've been very happy to help Rich Tarani and his team, and even before that, Jeff Pulver, Scott Cargman from Vaughn. When we first started, we've also been heavily involved in e-com, which you may remember that Lee Dryberg put on a few times, both in California and in Amsterdam, where not only did I moderate or speak, or most recently API Days in Amsterdam that Luis Borges put on, along with Rob Curver, but I like to moderate panels, and my style of moderation is a lot more like a Jimmy Fallon or a Jerry Springer, or even even other announcers along the way. So I like to dig into what's really there. No one gives a presentation when I'm moderating. We have a very interactive, very highly intense Q&A, because no one came to a conference to watch a PowerPoint. They can do that by watching a webinar with you and I, like we're going to do here today.
Indeed, yes. I remember the most recent one, noting that, what's the word I'm looking for? That you were direct with people in your line of questioning after at the event. Okay, I believe you have a presentation.
I'll tell you the secret, though.
Go ahead.
I always give all the panelists questions in advance to answer. And the rule's very simple. If you answer them, I'm going to make you look good. But if you think you can bugger off and slop off and not even answer the questions, I'm going to make you look really bad up on stage, because I'll find the one thing you don't know. And that's the question I'm going to ask. So the idea is to make people look smart. But if you don't want to help everybody else, then it's a barroom fight. Anyway, let's dig into what we've got to talk about today.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I guess those questions that you give them are the ones you know that the audience will want to have answered to give insights into what they're talking about. Totally
and completely, you're correct.
Great stuff, Andy. Okay, I'm going to pop you on screen share. We'll pop you near the top, and you've got, in fact, I'll tell you what, I'm going to pop you near the bottom because your logo's up there. So I've popped you there, and please go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about working from home in 2020. Obviously, David, the world has changed dramatically since January 1. When a lot of us used to work from home a few days a week, or working from home as part of a remote team, it was never everybody in the business. The back office was working in the office. The sales bullpen was humping away, doing everything they could in the office, because the sales managers believed they had to keep their hands around the team that was selling them and keeping an eye on them. I remember reading an article recently when Dialpad announced that they are going 100% working from home for their 450 employees. And Craig Walker made a point of mentioning that the sales bullpen was now also working from home. Well, that's a change, because they all used to work in the San Francisco and Austin offices full time. They didn't get to work the 2 days a week that the rest of the team had the choice of doing. I used to work with Craig and his team at Dialpad in 2017 and 2018 in the communications team. So it's a very big change when you see that. And the reason it's changed is this whole concept of remote work. And remote work is what you're doing. I asked you where you were today, and you told me you're in Brazil, and I'm in Florida. And last week I was in Las Vegas, and the week before that, Los Angeles. So work doesn't stop because you're not in the signal wire, quote, office in either Wisconsin or in California, but you're never there anyway. So people like you and I and others are very comfortable using all the tools and everything else that we have to allow us to work remotely.
Indeed, Andy, and as you probably know, because I know you know the signal wire guys well, they're very distributed anyway. Although they're our offices, they're kind of more like meeting spaces because most people are working from their own locations.
That's so true. And that's happening with every single company. Phonative did a shutdown of the office before the state of Massachusetts declared that certain companies had to work from home. And of course, Phonative, Steve Smith, who founded it, we've all been working remotely for months. Half the time I talk to Steve, he's not in the iHub in Lowell where the office address is. Steve's working from his home 5 minutes away. Same thing with their CFO, Jim Tomash. Same thing with Matt Abramson, who handles business development, and me as a CMO, and the support team. Everybody's been working from home at least 2 or 3 days a week before all this craziness began. And we're completely up and running without skipping a beat, even implementing new features and new services to serve the Phonative call center client base by empowering and enabling their customers to be able to work from home. Because today, the new normal, as I said at the top of the hour, is business unusual.
Right.
So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 3 key areas. What's changed in working from home, how to best work from home today, and the place you work. And we'll go through all that as we pass through the next half hour or so.
Great stuff.
You might remember that what working from home was like 2 months ago. I think this picture tells it all. It was a solo worker in the house. There they've got their laptop propped up, a headset, maybe a speakerphone, the cell phones to the right. There's a mouse sitting there, and that's it. The person's working from home, and there's no change. Well, a lot has changed. This might be an example of of people working from home today. The kids are home from school. They're doing distance learning. They're tying up the same internet that you used to use all by yourself. So we've gone from one person working at home and everybody else away to a whole new situation of multiple people working or playing, as the case may be, and we'll talk about that as we go through things. You also now have situations where before mom was working all by herself, now the kids are home from school, there's school books, there's workbooks, there's everything going on. So working from home, like life, has changed dramatically over the last 60 days. So David, is there anything you want me to cover that I'm not going to talk about here?
No, it looks like a very good list. When you were just talking about people working or playing from home, it just went through my mind that certainly in the UK, before I left, there were difficulties with bandwidth experienced by some providers. Not to say they went offline, but I know things were getting difficult. And you probably heard also that Microsoft Teams had a problem in Europe within the last week or two as well, through the sheer load that was placed on them.
Yes, I have. And that's one of the things I want to talk about today. So what's changed in working from home? Well, so for starters, it's a lot more people. A survey that we did at SkySwitch, we found that 58% of our reseller customers, 58%, were already working from home before the coronavirus happened. So that makes us feel really good that we're super well positioned, because the customer base of our reseller base was already used to working from home, and our reseller base were used to selling services for people who have businesses that allow or require people to work from home. So more people are working from home. It used to be less than 20%. Now I think we're probably close to 70 or 80% overall in that ballpark. And with more people working from home comes different challenges. First, are you set up to work from home? Second, do you have the right equipment to work from home? Third, do you know how to set boundaries to work from home? And most importantly, to pick up on what you just talked about, better connectivity, maybe. So one of the things I said to the various clients we work with is, I don't think our internet as we know it here in the US is set up to have everybody working from home. The reason is, during the workday, the ISPs adjust their traffic and shape their traffic to work through the urban core and the business centers around the country. It isn't until 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night that they would start to set up the network and shift that bandwidth. And remember, bandwidth is a fixed object or a fixed capability, capacity. It's not like there's unlimited bandwidth for everybody. So during the day, the ISPs migrate traffic from the urban core of major cities and metropolises to nighttime to the suburban or residential core.
Indeed, Andy, and that is the thing that certainly in Europe has been revealed, is the issues with that, when all of a sudden everybody is lighting up from home across the working day.
Precisely. And as a result, you have network congestion. That's number one. Number two is the fact that the way our networks are set up with multiplexers known as muxes and concentrators, you can only put so much watermelon through a garden hose. So no matter how fast you want it to go through, the size of that garden hose is going to control how fast the watermelon goes through it. The same thing is true with data and bits and bytes. You can't put more through because more people are working. The muxes and the concentrators and the networks and the routers and switches are only built to handle so much traffic at so much time. And they've been built out for the idea of residential living, not residential working. So if you wonder why your internet's slowing down, it's not because your network isn't necessarily able to keep up. It's because the infrastructure down the street, around the corner, going all the way back to the head end or the CO. The head end is where the cable company is, and the CO is the central office. They're limited to what's in the ground, which is why today you're starting to read where AT&T, Comcast, Verizon are all working harder to get more bandwidth out there because they know that they can't handle the concentration that's going on right now.
Indeed. No, I was going to add to that. The other thing, of course, that is very rarely do you have any quality of service implementation from the home end. So if you are wanting to speak while your youngsters are downloading the latest movie or watching whatever they're watching on Netflix, then people are finding issues with that as well.
That's true. That's why it's important to have, and I'll talk a little bit about smarter tools to get you through the day. That's why it's very important to have the right gear and equipment. Let's also face it, the reason I talk about better connectivity, maybe, most people are running technology that's 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. Maybe you have an 802.11n router when AC is the current best choice, and now we're at Wi-Fi 6, but you're not even at Wi-Fi 5. Maybe your cable modem is a DOCSIS 2.0 modem, not a 3.0 modem. All of these things impact throughput. So when you're used to working at the office where you're sitting on a Metro Ethernet connection and everything just comes up, snap, crackle, pop, and all of a sudden you're waiting, remembering the old days of AOL and the spinning wheel, waiting. Well, try this at home. Open up a bunch of browsers tabs, load up a bunch of pages, shut down your browser, reopen it, and see how long it takes for all of those tabs to refresh. And when we're working with active web pages where they're constantly live and being pushed data, a lot of the current routers and access points that are sold as consumer products, the ones you get from the cable company, the ones you get from your telephone company, they're not built to have 20 or 30 tabs open. They just can't handle it. So what happens? A little bit comes through at a time, and then a little bit more, then a little bit more. Now multiply that by 2 or 3 people in your house while the kid's watching the educational channel, the other kid's doing something with a music video, and mom's trying to have a call with her friends to figure out how we're going to keep the kids from going crazy while dad's in the other room trying to work. So that means there's a market right now to upgrade to business grade gear in the home where that problem won't occur.
Yeah, and just also on that point, Andy, one of the things I've heard from a lot of my hosted PBX friends is certainly in the UK, there's a large sale of AC adapters, because people are picking up, those people that don't want to use soft phones are picking up their phones from the office, taking them home, knowing that they're going to work in terms of the hosting, but then finding, of course, they don't have power over Ethernet. And so AC adapter sales are through the roof.
So one of the things that we were talking about, Kelly Osborne runs the SkySwitch store, and she was telling me about how there was a shortage of power over Ethernet and power bricks and cables and all the things that people needed to do to take their phone from the office that was connected via an Ethernet port. And I said, so what you're telling me is things like power bricks and headsets are becoming the hand sanitizer and the toilet paper of the telecom world. And she cracked up laughing, saying, yeah, you're right. And I had the same conversation with my good friend Darren Knapp from Poly the other day when we did a webinar like this over at SkySwitch. And the reality is, forget the hoarding. That's a whole different issue. People who are now having to work from home need to have smarter tools to get through the day. And those smarter tools can range from their phone, whether it's an iPhone or an Android, their desk phone, whether it's from Grandstream or Poly or Snome or Yealink or Fanvil or any of the brands that can work to support voice over IP, whether it's a webcam on your computer. One of my next purchases next month is going to be one of the new Logitech HD webcams that does 1080p video, so that whether I'm using Uber Conference or Zoom or SkySwitch's Meeting Manager or GoToMeeting, WebEx, I'll be able to show myself in beautiful 1080p versus 720, which is in the MacBooks today. So having smarter tools gets you through the day. Having a speakerphone. So right now I'm talking through the headset, but I'm letting your voice come through my Poly Callisto 7200. I have a 6200 headset in my ears. I can switch back and forth. I'm using Crisp as a noise reduction tool. Having smarter tools, both hardware and software. Here's my speakerphone. It's tiny. It's got 4 different mics, one on each side, and it fills the room, and it's got the same technology as some of the Poly large triangle phones. My headset has a little bit of noise reduction and noise cancellation. It's got microphones built in right here. I feel like Star Trek in the Borg era with it around my neck, but the audio quality is incredibly clean and crisp. And I'm running Crisp, a third-party plugin that allows me to selectively clean up background noise both on my end and the other person who I'm speaking to or with I'm in a web conference. You have to have smarter tools to get through the day. You also need to think about how to block out things. There's a wonderful service called Get Cold Turkey. I don't use it because I'm so used to filtering naturally, but in looking around, Cold Turkey allows you to shut down interruptions completely. No Facebook messages, no tweets, maybe even no email, so that you can keep focused during the day if you suffer from ADD or ADHD, or if you're just somebody who likes to go, oh, that's interesting, I'll go off there for a moment. Smarter tools to get through the day.
Very easily distracted sometimes.
We all are. And it's very easy to be distracted. My neighbors walk by and, they're not used to working from home. So when they see you in the hallway, to them, that's social interaction. They don't realize that maybe that 5 minutes between calls is the only time I can run downstairs to get the mail. So you need to be able to have ways of deflecting digitally as well as real world to get through your day efficiently. I'm a big user of Slack, a big user of Slack, but also I love to use Trello and Basecamp as a way of keeping myself and others organized. That way, we're not constantly having to go look for things. Making use of Google Docs and sharing and posting those links and having a set of permanent links that people can keep going to makes it easy to go back without having to constantly wonder, can you give me that file again? Where's that note? Email's a broken model. I try and stay out of email as much as I can. But you've got to have these tools that let you get through your day. I'm a big fan of Todoist. It's my daily checklist of things I have to follow up on, TODOIST. Tools like that, and there's a ton of things out there now on what tools you should use, but tools like that will really make it easier for you to stay productive and to get through the day.
Great advice, Andy. Excellent stuff.
Now, to work from home today, the first thing is we talked a little bit about the network to your home. So if you're on DSL and cable's in your area, the first recommendation is switch from DSL. DSL is a very old technology, and usually the upstream for DSL is a paltry 1.5 to 3 megabits per second. And that's shared in your neighborhood, as we were talking earlier about the multiplexers. The problem with DSL is it is a fixed amount of data can go through the pipe. And the further you are away from the central office, and the maximum distance is 18,500 feet. Last I checked for basic DSL. There is some long-range DSL, but it's not really that much better. Your performance degrades. I remember talking to my doctor in Encinitas, California, a couple of years ago, and I was watching him struggle with his desktop, and he was struggling pulling up my financial information. He was struggling pulling up my payment information, but what he was really struggling with was pulling up my medical records. Now, you know that doctors like to get you in and out of the office. My doctor was kind of different. He was a concierge physician, and I said, "Why are you using a pedestrian service for a VIP business?" And he thought all he could use was AT&T in California. I had him switch over to the local cable company, Cox. And the next time I was back in the office, I asked him how the internet, I asked his assistant, Donna, what the internet experience was like now. And they said, "Oh my God, it's so much different. We don't wait for things. When we hit the button, what we need comes up." So the first thing is think about the network coming to your home and determine if it's strong enough to really support working from home the way you worked in the office. That's number one. Number
Let me
two.
jump in if I may, Andy, because on that very point, we have traditionally selected our broadband services by download speed because we were streaming things, we were wanting results, and the stuff we were sending upstream was very small. But of course, that changes now, doesn't it, when we're working from home and when we're sending video?
Completely and totally, and that's an excellent point, David. The reality is it's not the download that matters so much as it is the upload or your upstream. And if you can get more upstream, I'm on a 40 megabit upstream connection from Comcast, Xfinity. When I had my place in Marina del Rey in California, I was on a symmetrical gigabit connection that my normal throughput was about 500 to 600 megabits per second, because that was a fiber connection to my apartment. It was rock solid. It was rock stable. Right now, what you're seeing is fiber to the neighborhood from most of the cable companies, and only in some of the newer builds in downtown areas and newer communities are you seeing fiber to the premise. Now, we're starting to hear that more and more of that's being rolled out here in the US. I can tell you that my fiber experiences when I'm in the UK or in Spain or Portugal blows away my cable experience here. So better connectivity to your home, invest in the better upload.
Good advice.
Now, let's talk about in your home. I mentioned earlier that most people have older networking gear. This is not the time to be buying the cheapest Wi-Fi network you can find. Invest in a mesh network, whether it's Eero, which is now owned by Amazon, or whether it's Google Nest, which is Google's idea of a mesh network, or buying something from Netgear or Linksys. Invest in a good quality prosumer grade, or if you really want to invest, go up and look at some of the gear from Meraki, which is now part of Cisco, or Ruckus. Some of the gear, the Bel Air equipment, if you have a very large house, or you're somebody like Anthony Minasali, who I'll never forget, we were at a conference 2 years ago, and Anthony rented this absolutely monstrous house in Fort Lauderdale, a castle.
Yeah.
And
they're becoming known as the free switch frat houses, these things.
that's right. And it was so big, Wi-Fi didn't work everywhere. Well, you need business grade Wi-Fi because the wattage behind it, but also the throughput. Again, I use the example, you can only put so much watermelon through a garden hose. But if you don't beef up your network, if you don't have the right gear, I'll never forget, I took an Airbnb in Venice, California a couple of years ago when I first moved back from Portugal. And I got to know the owner pretty well, and we were having this conversation about internet speeds, and he was gracious enough to up his speeds to 350 megs down and 100 megs up. But he could never get 100 megs in either direction. So I said, send me a picture of your cable modem and give me the model number. Well, it turned out for 6 months, Time Warner had been charging him for the 350 by 100 service, or 350 by 50, whatever it was. But they didn't replace his modem, and he had a modem that could do no faster than 100 megabits. So here he was paying for a service that he could never receive because they didn't offer him a new modem. He got the new modem before I arrived. I got in there, and then I dealt with them. He was nice enough to put me on his listing to have them remove their firewall because they were blocking TLS, which meant VoIP calls, conference calls, a bunch of things that used TLS didn't work. So not because TLS requires a specific port, but because the firewall was up, it was treating TLS as rogue packets. So we were able to get that resolved within 15, 20 minutes. I'll never forget, I had TR Meisner, who's now with Google. Back then, TR was with Dialpad, and he says, just have them do this. So know about the networking in your home, but buy good gear. The other thing is, and most people think, oh, Wi-Fi is the only answer. You know what? If you can go hardwired to your router or to your cable company or telephone company's supplied device, go hardwired if you can. You're going to avoid a lot of issues like the microwave interfering with your Wi-Fi. So think about having the right network in your home.
Good advice, and I've personally come across that as well. My parents were having internet outages, and they're hard to predict. I don't know exactly what was going on, but as soon as we ran a wire, they got perfect continuous service and have never looked back since.
You know, we all think that, Wi-Fi is the answer. Wi-Fi is a great answer, but a Cat6 Ethernet cable connected to a gigabit Ethernet internet pipe is going to make you so much happier. Same thing when it's connected to your television sets and things like that. So let's also talk about the solutions on your computer. I'm a big fan of using the ooklaspeedtest.net to see what my conditions are like. And how do I know that the internet's starting to fracture a little bit more where I live? I'll run a speed test at say 3 or 4 in the morning, and I'll see amazing speed from a computer sitting in the same location over Wi-Fi or which is hardwired. 6 hours later at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm getting half of those speeds. Why? The network capacity of the ISP is being jammed. So have the tools on your computer to know what works when. Install software not when you're working, but the night before or after you're done your day. Make sure you're doing any, if you're doing any installations of the latest version of Office, if you're a Microsoft Office 365 user, or Outlook, or even extensions and updates for cloud services. Try to do your updates in the evening where it won't get in the way of your workplace. And do, if you really can, hold off to the weekend for a very simple reason. You don't want to have something crap out during the workday when you need to be doing something essential. So think about when you update your computer. If you've got a Mac and there's a new version of Mac OS, if you've got an iPhone, an iPad, an Android device, think about doing the updates when you're not working, because there's nothing worse than saying, I'm waiting for my computer to update, I'm waiting for this to install. And right now we're all so dependent on those updates coming from the cloud that we're all going after those updates. Another suggestion about the solutions on your computer, Start your conference calls or your telephone calls at a time other than the top of the hour and the 30-minute mark. Start a call at 36 minutes into the hour or 22 minutes into the hour. Because what we're finding with the conference calling services and even the phone companies is those are the peak times when new sessions start. Everything's a session. And again, on the other end, where your session is being set up, think about all the other folks who are trying to set up a call at the exact same time. So go a little off time. At SkySwitch, I do my daily stand-ups with my marketing team. We start at like 35 minutes into the hour. And it's just a 5-minute switch.
That's really good advice. And from somebody that I guess you're seeing all of these things in the center of SkySwitch at the times when people are jumping on. Very good advice, and not something that would have. I mean, now you mention it, it kind of seems like common sense, but it's not something that would have been intuitive, I don't think.
Well, I'm seeing it, and I've always had my meetings end at, say, 5 minutes before the top of the hour. Now those 30-minute meetings will end at 5 minutes after, because I start. What I also tell people to do is schedule some time between your calls and make that part of your workday. I've been experimenting with a new service called Woven, W-O-V-E-N. It's Calendly or Schedule Once on steroids, and they're great people to work with. It's been free up until now. By publishing my calendar links, people are able to schedule with me. And if they happen to pick a time that just really won't work out, I just simply say, sorry, let's look at another time. But it's, using a smarter tool to get through my day that's on my computer, obviously in the cloud, because almost everything we're using is a cloud service or cloud-based, which allows me to go from computer to iPad to Pixelbook to MacBook to Android to iPhone. It doesn't really matter which platform I'm on, because I've migrated to the cloud since, whenever Google Suite started. So having those solutions at your fingertips or on your computer that can make it work. Things like Dropbox, Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, Box, all of these services offer varying degrees of security, sharing capabilities. Make sure you have the access to all of those things on your computer. Google has a drive that lets you make it easy so you can quickly get to your files on the cloud or even store them on your computer. Box is the same way. Dropbox is the same way. Have the right solution so you can get to your materials when you need it. Using tools like Slack to share, comment, pass things back and forth. Create shared Slack channels. Now, most people have Slack in their company, but by having a shared channel with people you're working with outside the company saves time and eliminates waste. I can tell you one of the things we're doing with Phonitive and a couple other companies, we've put something together in such a short amount of time. First, it was a Slack chat because I was on multiple companies' Slacks. I was able to get everybody to say yes to an idea within an hour. I then was able to get a Slack group up and running within a day with everybody, and then was able to get everybody to agree on what we were doing one business day later. And as of yesterday, no more than a week from ideation and agreement that everybody needed to work together between 5 different companies, we have a solution that's being deployed for a customer well past what would be alpha or beta. That's going to be able to go into production next week. We're able to turn this stuff around really quickly by using smarter tools like Slack as a solution on our computer.
That's great stuff, Andy. I think the other thing I'd say there is you talked about having Slack channels open not only inside the company but with the other people you work with, including customers. And I think not only does that increase expediency, but it also increases transparency. And I think customers appreciate that, and it makes them even more trusting of you.
Without question, David, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about transparency. You often have transparency in the place you work, but you don't have transparency between entities. So one of the things you talked about transparency, is access. But first, you have to be clear and upfront on what you're doing, but then you have to make everybody accessible. So that's what we were able to do with Phonative using the Slack channel to bring in basically the 5 different entities that are all now working together. And what's great is it's removed the friction. So it's not the hub and spoke model like flying Southwest from Tampa, Florida to Chicago to get to San Jose and all those planes converge at once. We've made it direct and nonstop, so the companies who are part of the ecosystem are able to talk to one another without constantly going through a central hub, which can often be a bottleneck. So you've got transparency, you've got access, and now you've got efficiency. So when you're setting up your place to work remotely, think about how you're going to accomplish that with your team members. I'm doing something else tonight with another entity in the wine world, and we're doing practice runs on things, and we're doing meetings. We've migrated everybody onto Zoom in this case, even though for meetings we're using Uber Conference, but for this type of live production stuff, we're using Zoom because of its video capability at streaming out. So again, having what you need and knowing what you need and not being married to a specific solution. Yes, you might be an Office 365 house, but guess what? Google has a way beat over sharing and commenting and document creation. Just sometimes think about using the better tool when you're working where you are. Having lighting properly. I have to order a light group for my computer because I'm getting a new MacBook Air. I want to see which are the right ones for it. Have the right speaker phones. Make sure they're set up. Make sure you know how to mute, whether it's a soft key or a hard key. All of these tools will help you. Having different headsets. I have 2 or 3 different Bluetooth headsets that I keep around. One from Snome, one from Poly. Why? Because throughout the day, even though these are designed to last long, sooner or later the battery's going to run out. So if you're not on, make sure you have your charging cables there. Have some things like power bricks available. I keep these charged up just in case there's a power failure, which has been happening in different parts of the country due to all this. One of my staff members at SkySwitch yesterday woke up to a power failure. She didn't have a power brick. My text to her was, turn off your phone until you really need to use it, because your phone will die down without being charged. So have the tools you need. Make sure you can stay productive. And part of staying productive means knowing when to walk away from the computer or the smartphone to take a break. Sometimes you need to take a pause to get your energy back up.
Yeah, indeed. Just before we move on, Andy, I just want to go back to what you were just talking about, effectively about continuity and keeping connected. I also know that some people, including myself, have gone for UPSs to hold up their systems in the event of a power outage. And of course, when you were talking about buying routers, or as we would say in the UK, routers, you can have the option where you can either plug in a USB 4G or 5G dongle, or of course put a SIM in with some of them as well.
Absolutely. And there are all, it's not the wrong time to go out and buy a MiFi device as a backup. Your phone is only so good as a hotspot. You're having power supplies and power bricks. I've got a bunch of them. Keep them charged. It's not when you need it is when you should decide, oh, we should charge this up. Charge them up so you have them when you need them. Funny story about router versus router. I grew up in Philadelphia. It was Route 1. When I got to California, Highway 1 was known as Route 1. Had the router been invented on the East Coast, they would have called it a router. But because they invented it on the West Coast, they called it a router. That's a little thing for your next Trivial Pursuit game, David.
You learn something every day. And we were just talking about the through-the-roof sales of power bricks, power over Ethernet, and different the AC wall adapters. The other thing is those MiFis. I do know from hearing from other people that those are in pretty short supply, the little MiFi boxes at the moment.
Well, not only are they in pretty short supply, there weren't that many of them made because people weren't buying them, because people have said, oh, I can use my phone as a hotspot. Why do I need to buy another device and pay for another contract? Well, there's a difference between, here's my OnePlus 7T Pro McLaren, there's a difference between how this phone operates and how a true MiFi operates. But again, there are also business grade products from companies like Cradlepoint, Instigo, Peplink that are built for heavier usage. I personally have had MiFi since the day Novatel Wireless released the first MiFi. And one of the problems I always ran into when I was working in hotels with them, this is in a day where hotel internet was really bad. I was using my own MiFi to get around it. They tend to overheat at a certain point in time and your performance degrades. Once again, they weren't built to be on, 24/7 consumer grade products. And then there's another problem. Our mobile networks aren't also built for a steady connection from any one person. Remember, the mobile network was a mobile network. It was designed for you to be moving from tower to tower, not to be fixed. 5G will solve that, but it's not everywhere yet.
Great stuff. Okay, I've got us both on the screen at the moment because we're conversing, but I'm going to pop you back on the slides so you can continue.
So the last thing I want to wrap up with is the perfect setup. And a lot of people will say, oh, you need a standing desk, or oh, you need a seated desk, oh, you need a private work area, oh, you shouldn't work where you sleep, oh, you shouldn't. I'm going to tell you that's all hogwash. The perfect setup is where you feel the most productive and the most creative or the most analytical to do your job. If you're more comfortable sitting on the couch with the laptop propped up on your knees and you're writing away and you've got the headsets going in your ears, great. If you're more comfortable with the speakers from your TV going, fantastic. If you're happier putting up your word processing document from Docs or Microsoft Word up on the big screen using a Chromecast, fabulous. The perfect setup is what's perfect for you. You're going to see a lot of tips. Oh, you need a room which is dark where you can close the shades. You know what? If you're more comfortable working by a window that's light outside so you don't get claustrophobic, that's great for you. Your computer, if a Mac is what you like, work on a Mac. If a PC is what you like, a Windows machine, a Surface Pro, work on that. If you like a Chromebook, because your entire life is in the cloud, work on a Google Pixel book or a Samsung Chromebook. The perfect setup is what's right for you. Headsets, microphones, speakerphones. I've got more headsets here than I know what to do with. But you know what? They're all here for different reasons. Some work better when I'm in the car. Some work better when I'm in the office. Some work better when I'm working out. So again, your perfect setup is really about what's perfect for you. Don't let somebody tell you what's perfect for them. I'll give you an example. I put out a newsletter every day called the Comunicano. I usually write it before I get out of bed in the morning. Why? I'm relaxed. I've got Pandora or Spotify playing on my widescreen TV. I've got the window bringing light in, so it's after 7 o'clock. I'm going through all the different news feeds that I receive each morning, and I'm picking the stories that go into it. And I'm really relaxed. If I'm leading a conference call, I'm going to be sitting somewhere like this because I want to be in that leadership position. But sometimes when I'm taking a conference call and I know I'm there to listen or I'm listening to a webinar, I'm on my beanbag chair in my back office, my beanbag couch. I'm laying down. I'm relaxed. I'm comfortable because there's no reason to be seated for 8 hours in a row or 10 hours in a row. Other times I'll be at my standing desk. So the perfect setup is what's perfect for you. And my last point on that is if you've got a house, if you're a solo worker, if you've got a lot of room during the day, move around from room to room. Just make sure that what we were talking about, the networking in your home and the solutions that you have in front of you, provide you the smart tools to let you get through the day wherever you're working from home.
Great stuff, and there's a wealth of advice just there. I'm going to put us back so we're both on the screen. There we are now. Thank you very much for showing that. There was not only good tech advice, but good advice for working life in general there, I think.
I hope so. David, I've been doing it long enough and have worked, at one point, Comunicano had as many as 30 employees. Almost all of them work from home. I had 4 or 5 who were in the San Diego area, sometimes as many as 6 people running in and out of my house all day and all week. And then one day they all just decided that working from home was much easier. Why is it good to work from home? Well, you don't have to comb your hair every day if nobody's going to see you. You don't have to put on a clean shirt necessarily, so you're saving money on dry cleaning. You can work in sweats and comfort. The standing joke is there's some people who work with no pants on. Well, sorry, I do have pants on. You can work in your bathrobe. Years ago, a company called Guru.com gave out bathrobes to everybody who was working from home. That was in the mid to late 90s, at the dawning of this era of working from home. You get to be more comfortable. Working from home is also good for the environment. You're not driving around. As a matter of fact, the air pollution index around the world over the last 2 weeks has dropped considerably. Why? Nobody's driving to work and no one's going to appointments.
Yeah, very, very powerful points indeed. And of course, all of this is not to say that it's never a good idea to meet up in person. We both know it is, because we're both keen to get to events like ClueCon and other industry events where possible. But yeah, the experience you shared is a very, very useful thing.
Well, it's been great to spend time with you. It's always good to be part of the ClueCon community. Looking forward to ClueCon this coming August in Chicago at the Intercontinental. Assuming everything goes as planned, we'll be there, and we'll be looking forward to seeing each other. And by then, assuming the world is not as bad as it is today, everybody's going to want to come to events, just like SkySwitch Vectors in November. Right now, you have to continue the idea that those businesses and those events will be happening, and if they can't happen, there'll be alternatives to fill the void that the companies will create.
Indeed, yeah, very well said, and that's exactly the attitude from Sharon, who's the team that are organising ClueCon. Is we're going ahead, we're looking forward to it. If things change, we'll roll with those changes.
I'm looking forward to seeing you in Chicago.
Yeah,
we'll share a glass of wine and we'll find James Bodie and have a couple of pink drinks. Mr. Dangerous Demos himself, my long-running sidekick from our TruePhone days.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody appreciates seeing James do that. Just one other ClueCon story before we finish. And by the way, I should tell everybody that they can get their passes for ClueCon, which are 100% refundable if we find out later that we can't go ahead. But you go to ClueCon.com to get those, and we're on between the 3rd and the 6th of August in the Intercontinental, as Andy already mentioned. And yeah, just this story to close. I don't know whether you were there to see this in person, Andy, but it's when one of the demos was hacking the hotel card keys. Do you remember that one? And,
oh, yeah.
And James was kind of comparing that demo from the stage, that there were some people with a remote camera going to hack a hotel room because they'd cloned the card key. But what James didn't know is it was his room that had been hacked.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think he eventually did figure it out. He goes, wait a minute, that was my room. As only James can be. So, we're all having fun at the expense of James. When I used to do the World Technology Roundup with Ken Rakowski, James would always send us notes that he was listening to us while taking a bath. So he would say, why do you have to tell everybody I'm taking a bath and listening to you? Because you know what, David, I bet when James listens to this webcast, he'll be taking a bath.
Maybe he is. Well, there's an inspiring note to finish on. Andy, thanks very much for giving of your time and expertise. We very much appreciate it.
Everybody, stay safe out there, because it's not safe as usual. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy, and see you at ClueCon.